Henry B. Freed is well into his 8th decade of serving the horological industry as a teacher, craftsman, inventor, lecturer, traveler, collector, industry consultant, author, and horological association pioneer. He was the first instructor of watch repair in a public school system and wrote the textbook for its curriculum, the Watch Repairer's Manual, which is now in its 4th printing. The list of books he has authored is impressive, and most are still in print. The Watch Escapement was first published in 1959 and remains one of the best treatments of this often neglected subject. Henry's drawings are noted for their clarity and accuracy. When the electric watch technology became established, Henry recognized the need for watchmakers to be trained in electronics, so he wrote this book, the Electric Watch Repair Manual. It provides a good basic course in electrical theory and repair information on specific calibers. Repairing Quartz Watches is now in its 2nd printing. It provides an easily understood explanation of quartz theory and practical repair information. The AWI collection is the title of his latest book. It features color photographs of the most prized pieces from the AWI Museum and the AWI collection, along with text on the features and histories of each item. Henry was a regular contributor to Jeweler Circular Keystone magazine and served as its horological editor. Of course, he is best known to AWI members as author of the popular Question and Answers column in Horological Times, and writes most of the book reviews that appear in the magazine. Other articles on various subjects appear from time to time as well. Several patents have resulted from his fertile brain. The Bulova Universal Movement Holder and the Zantec Freed Button Press, which simplifies the removal and replacement of push buttons, are but 2 examples. Henry began collecting as a youth, and he still has an eye for the unusual horological piece. Henry Freed has been very active in association work all his life. He was president of the Horological Society of New York and served as the editor of its newsletter for several years. He was active in the Horological Institute of America and was a founder of the National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors. He also organized the AWI Chapter 102 of NAWCC. He has been a major contributor to the success of AWI. As president, director, writer, and worker behind the scenes. Henry is in great demand as a lecturer, industry consultant, and has been called as an expert witness in many court cases. Henry is a traveling man. His 20th horological tour will take place in May 1993 to England, Wales, and Scotland. He has escorted groups literally all over the world: Russia, the Orient, South Pacific, Europe, Greece, just a few of the places he has taken his flock. His tours are very popular because they include historic as well as horological attractions. Virtually every important award in the horological profession has been bestowed on Henry Freed. He is a Silver Star Fellow of the National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors and the first to receive the Henry B. Freed Award. He was the first recipient, along with Josephine and Orville Higgins, of AWI's top award, Fellow of the American Watchmakers Institute. He is a Fellow of the British Horological Institute and recently became the first American to receive the coveted silver medal of that organization. In 1991, Modern Jeweler magazine presented their Lifetime Achievement Award to him, and the AWI Elm Trust Library was renamed the Henry B. Freed Library in his honor. Perhaps his greatest award has been his family. As active as he has been, he and his wife Tina found the time to raise a daughter who is a teacher and a son, a nationally known artist, who passed away at the height of his career. Now let us listen to Henry and Robert Nelson as he tells of his early life and how he became the expert that he is.
I am Robert Nelson of the AWI. We are meeting in Cincinnati, Ohio at the 32nd annual meeting of the American Watchmakers Institute on June 27th, 1992. This will be a conversation with Henry Freed. Anyone involved in the field of horology knows something about the accomplishments of this international authority on this subject. But in this interview, we want to learn a little more about Henry Freed the man. From what kind of a background does a man come who reaches the stature that he has today? So we would like to begin this interview by asking Henry to tell us something about your background, perhaps your grandparents or your great-grandparents, where they came from, and we'd like to know a little more on this subject.
Well, actually, I'm a third-generation watchmaker. My great-grandfather was not a watchmaker, but my grandfather and my father were. And they started when people of my ethnic origin were enfranchised by Napoleon when he conquered that part of the world, and that became the empire under which Franz Joseph at that time was the king, the emperor. My father, when they were franchised, my great-grandfather took my grandfather and apprenticed him to a watchmaker. He was permitted to take any trade they wanted, and he chose watchmaking. And of course, my father soon followed as a watchmaker. And he migrated to the United States in 1886. And of course, he eventually had a family of 6 sons and 2 daughters. The daughters were the eldest and the youngest. In between, he had 6 rambunctious children. And they had all kind of interests, but mainly they were taught watchmaking.
In what country did they come from?
Poland. Of course, at that time, Poland was under the Austrian Empire, part of the Austrian Empire of the Habsburgs, and of course, Franz Joseph, the king at the time of the empire, the emperor, I should say.
Now they came here, and where did they settle?
They came here in 1886, and they settled first in Manhattan, New York City, and later in Brooklyn. Most of their life was in Brooklyn, New York.
Can we ask you then when you were born, and were you born in Brooklyn?
I was born in Brooklyn on January 8th, 1907.
1907. That
Correct.
means that today you are 85 years old, correct?
Plus a few months.
Plus a few months. Okay, then we'd like to have you tell us a little more about your childhood and your early education.
Well, as a child, of course, I watched my father work. I was always fascinated with the loop in his eye and the bench. When he came here, he opened up, had a little space in a barber shop where he thought there was so much male traffic. He would get these big watches that they carried in their vest pockets, and he could repair them, which he did. It worked out all right. But of course, sometimes, as I mentioned, some of the watches had a lot of hair in them because of the hairs flying around the room. So it was a little tougher. So eventually he opened up a shop in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, where we lived. And there was called Railroad Flats because there were 5 rooms. The front was a store to attract customers with some sort of merchandise. And the rest of the rooms were bedrooms and, of course, a kitchen. So that's where we went to school. We ate, lived, etc. We went to school in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Williamsburg was that part of Williamsburg, which was where the story "The Tree Grows in Brooklyn" originated and wrote about.
You indicated that you were one of several children. Tell us a little about your siblings.
Well, as I said, I was the middle son of 6 sons. There was my eldest, my sister who was eldest. Then was my brother, Jack, and then the younger brother was Louis, and then my immediate elder brother was Saul. They were all at one time or other in the watch business because of the influence of my father. Then my younger brothers also learned watchmaking. They weren't learned it from me and my elder brother Saul, who later, when he was an adult, he became an importer of watches. Later on, he was president of the Canterbury Watch Company in New York, with offices on Maiden Lane.
Can you tell us a little about when you first really began to work on watches?
Well, it wasn't watches. We all learned first assembling and cleaning alarm clocks or cuckoo clocks. We didn't take them all apart. We cleaned them, or my father did clean them, and he would assemble them. And later on, as we grew more skilled, we could actually assemble the clocks and work on them. But unfortunately, when I was just about getting into the middle of it, I was 13 and a half when my father died. He died of a infectious disease brought over by the returning soldiers from World War I. He died in 1920.
So after 13 and a half, you really started to make your living at the watchmaker's bench?
Well, not exactly, because my brothers took me out of high school. I was in the fifth term, starting the fifth term high school in September.
Wait now, you were only 13 and you were in your fifth term at
13
high
and a
school.
half.
Something happened along the way to get
Oh,
you
yeah.
that far ahead.
They skipped me in the elementary school and the junior high school. So I gained a full year towards my graduation from high school, when that was interrupted, when my brothers needed whatever little money I could earn, and took me out of there, and they gave me a job right where, not where they worked, but very close. I'd say 100 feet at the most from where they worked somewhere else on Maiden Lane. I got a job with S.J. Hyman Company on 91113 Maiden Lane. And soon after that, I worked, when I learned to do some regular repairs. At first I was an errand boy, and then I also helped by sewing silk ribbons on ladies' watch cases. And then, of course, I learned how to put movements in watch cases, learned how to case watches, fit hands, dials, and so on, little by little. But then the real education came a little later, when I got a job with Mr. I.N. Looker, who was not only a watchmaker, but also a factory representative of people from Rhode Island. And there I learned a lot more, because he had other watchmakers working for him. And I was then, of course, fitting stems and crowns and original. You took the stem out, you shortened it, you filed it, you fit it, you cased it, and so on. And little by little, change mainsprings, fit mainsprings, take the dials off to have them refinished or repainted, and then, of course, run errands to all the other fine companies, obtaining movements, parts, and also casing them and doing even repairs. Sometimes when the other watchmakers were busy, they gave me, "Oh, let's see what you can do," and I adapted very quickly.
Did you have any more formal watchmaker training, or was it primarily learned from the people you worked with?
I apprenticed. See, I learned the basics from my father, so I knew what watches were, how to handle them, how to be delicate. And of course, in those days, if you brought a magnet near the house, you'd get it. There's no way in those days with direct current to demagnetize watches. You had to go to New York, where they had a material house, where they had this type of demagnetizer. And I went through my initiation very easily. And the first time I went there, they told me to put my hands on the demagnetizer so it wouldn't shift when pulling out the serrated copper rod, which would create alternating current with the lamp burning. And when I did that, when they pulled it out first, my hair stood up on end. And the shock went with it. So I got a good beginning initiation. But later on, of course, when going back to my employer, he was pretty good. But later on, when he was old and he was going to retire, and he saw that I had certain talents, mechanics, and also some academic talent. So he called my brother one day. He says, "I want to see you about your brother Henry." And he says, "What did he do?" "I'll kill him." Nothing minute. But you got to kill him. That's the punishment. So, no, 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 come over. And when he came over, he said, well, your brother Henry here is a very intelligent boy, and I think he should have a formal education. He said, we can't afford that. And I said, Mr. Looker, am I all right? No, you're fine. Why not go to night school? Go to night school and get your a regular education. I says, where am I going to do my homework? He says, you're going to do it right here. And now I'm going to make sure you do it. And we did very well. And so I went to night school, and another incident where it's almost like an O. Henry story. I took Spanish. I took 2 other majors, and I became very active in the night school. Running, of course, no more bicycle racing, but I took running, and I won the first cross-country race I was in. I was ashamed to run in trousers. I ran in pants, my vest, but my jacket was held by my younger brother. And we ran around Prospect Park, Brooklyn, 3 3/4 miles. It was no problem. And, but anyway, I learned Spanish. And I was with this Mr. Looker. And he represented some people in Providence, cheap jewelry people, as well as watches and some little clocks. And he was showing these wares to people from Argentina. But in the meantime, I'd learned Spanish pretty well, which has deteriorated since. And he says, show these people these things, and I'm listening to them in Spanish, conversing with one another. Then suddenly my eyes opened up. They're talking to one another. Why are you ordering so much? He says, why shouldn't we? We're never going to pay him. So I looked at that. I says, Mr. Looker, mind if I leave the room? He says, oh, go ahead, Henry, go ahead. With my only nickel, my nickel to go home, I called him on the phone upstairs, and I told him what was going to be. And he said, you take your time, come back here. When I did, he said, you take care of this, show them the wares and watches, cheap watches, and so on. And I'll be back soon. I just have to, take care of myself. Okay, what he did, he called up the then equivalent to the Jewelers Vigilance Committee, and they told him to fill the order. But those fellows never were alone. For the rest of the time, they were in America. He filled the order, they had the merchandise, and they were supposed to pay him. Of course, they didn't. But they went on a ship. When they went on a ship, the police were waiting for them. So he wanted to give me a raise. I said, I wouldn't take it. It's my job. Well, he liked me very much, and I liked him very much. And he was not of my ethnic origin, but yet every holiday, holy holidays, there's a prayer for him. He was so good. But what he really started me, and he is responsible, he wasn't that good a watchmaker. It's not good that way, but he saw where my inclinations were. And he would not retire until he had placed me in a job where my skills, knowledge, and intelligence would sort of flourish with the surroundings. And then he put me with the KK Importing Corporation. They were the largest importers of Swiss watch parts, or with Japanese glasses, watch glasses. And it was operated by an Italian, Mr. Catino was his name, and he had been an army officer in Italy in the First World War and became deaf from the ammunition exploding. And in there, that place, he had a number of watchmakers, because in those days, the Swiss parts never fitted. They were just raw, and you had to fit them. So he had these people making parts, fitting them, and doing special order work. They were Swiss. All of them were Swiss. And there was one woman who was the wife of the one who was the most skilled watchmaker there, and she did the hairspring vibrating. And I was separating these two, because even though they were husband and wife, they would fight. So Mr. Catino put me between the two. And many, many humorous things took place. But I got to know those good watchmakers and learned from them, and they would teach me. But also, during the lunch hours, you ate in a certain cafeteria. It was right between, it was on John Street and the arcade between 15 Maiden Lane, which was an arcade building. 15 Maiden Lane was a famous building for jewelry. In fact, it had all kind of guards, safeguards, technology at that time, in the early 20s, for even Bert would say, a robber. There was a signal, gates would come down, and you couldn't get out of the building. And in fact, there was a movie made, 15 Main Lane. Sometimes you'll see it on a Late Late Show. Well, anyway, within about, I'd say, within 200-yard radius of the building I worked were all the great importers of America, and representing the American watch factories and the Swiss and German factories, like Otto Flanger in Germany, and French Jacques Leroy was another. And of course you have Patek, you have Vacheron Constantin, Ulysses Norden, Hayden and Wheeler, every one of them, all the big names were there. And during lunch hours, you looked at this big cafeteria. Well, they always ate the same thing. The jewelers, diamond setters were on the table eating. The jewelers were another, engravers another, and the watchmakers were another, and so on and so on. So I would sit there and just soak in all the information they would talk about. And I got to know them. I tried to pump them with information. They were pretty nice. Not all of them, but those who did were very nice. And but one day, my boss used to go to Japan and Switzerland. He was brilliant mind, brilliant watchmaker himself. And he taught me a lot of things himself too, but he was more of an administrator in this business. Deaf, he spoke 7 languages. Horrible, diction, because he learned, even while he was deaf, he learned from reading. He had this good intelligence. And he comes back from Switzerland, he gives me a notebook, like the cheap notebooks. But it was not a notebook. It was filled with French and drawings of hairsprings and skateboards and so on. He got it from the school in Neuchâtel.
Now, what did that book mean to you in French? You had not studied French.
Well, that's a good question, because I didn't know what that I know a little French from the Swiss people there. But I went and bought a dictionary, and I took another notebook and I copied word for word everything that was in that notebook. And I was still going to night school, remember. And when my boss, he said, "What are you doing with that?" I told him what I did. He says, "It's ridiculous. Why don't you go to the library? They have books on watches and clocks there." And what? This is a revelation. So when I went to the library and they said, go over there, the 681 file. 681 is the librarian's methods in those days identifying books of different interests. Watchmaking was 681, which I'll never forget. When I saw that row of books, I tell people, well, the first time I saw it I was like a child in front of at Christmas time, in front of a big toy shop where the window broke and you imagine you could take everything. I said, all these books, I wanted to take them all out and read them. No, he says, you take this one out, this is good for you, the librarian would know. And I come along and I really had a good memory. And sometimes, even then, I think it was photographic, because I could remember most every word in some of those books and what part of the book they were on, and what page and so on, what they looked like. There wasn't a night that I couldn't wait until I woke up in the morning to see what was going to be on my table, a watch on my table. I used to dream watches. They're almost like a fetish. I loved them, just couldn't wait. And if I got a watch, let's say, I never saw before, and all it needed was a ratchet screw, that watch was taken completely apart. And later on, my boss saw me doing it. He didn't discourage me. He got the idea. He says, "Well, you're doing it. Can you count the teeth of the wheels, measure them, and we'll make a book," which we eventually did. It was the only book, and I still have a copy. He had it printed in Italy, in Sicilian, in Messina. We eventually had this book, so we had to match a part. We looked at this wheel. We looked at the diameter of the wheel, the number of teeth, and we looked in this book, center wheels, third wheels, fourth wheels. He gave numbers to these things. Let's say 1 was a barrel, 2 was an arbor, 3 was a center wheel, 4th was a third wheel, etc., etc. 6 was a escape wheel. And by counting the teeth and diameter, and also the name of the watch. But he knew the factory. But in the early days, you couldn't tell who the manufacturer was. If you had, let's say, a Hafers watch, or a Benrus watch, or what other, or a Bulliver watch, you'd know where they bought them. But My boss did. He went to Europe, as a horological detective, and he had a numbering system that started with 700. And the first 10 numbers were A. Michel. The next ones were Felser, from till 718, and 20 was Optima, and after that was Fontmelon. Then it was A. Shield, then it was Kurt, it was Essor. This went down the line to about 80 different A-Bosch makers, and he gave them each numbers. This eventually, and of course, the fingerprint system as setting bridge and set parts, he invented. And I used to, every time he says, okay, you're doing that, let's do it right. We take the set bridge off and put a piece of paper on top of a white piece get it on a white piece of paper, but first a carbon piece of paper. Under the set bridge, put an anvil on it, bang, it had to have an impression of the set part. Or sometimes a black ink pad, like a stamp pad. We do the same thing, and then with my drawing ability, I could fill it in. And he made a catalog of it. That was the first catalog.
We've been hearing about much of your life as a teenager, and somewhere along the line you got the education necessary and the training necessary to eventually become a teacher as a watchmaker. You were obviously went through your early manhood and met and married your lovely wife Tina, which we've all known and loved. Could you tell us a little about your preparation to becoming a teacher and your early manhood?
Well, by the 1920s, I was head watchmaker of the same company. And most of the education I got from the other two watchmakers there and the lady who did hairspring work, Mrs. Glure. And also I befriended these watchmakers who, or let's say, represented Patek Philippe, Omega, Ulysses Nord, and Vacheron Constantine, all in the neighborhood. And I used to go with them to their office, and they permitted me to watch them work. And sometimes it got so they helped them work for no charge, as long as I could learn from them. And they showed me many, many secrets. Some of them did it willingly. Some of them warned that if I transferred the skill or knowledge, they would never show it to me again. There are people, all kinds of people. Some are secretive, but most of them were pretty good. And there were all extraction, Czech, French, Swiss a lot, German, of course, and some from England who were very good watchmakers. And most of the English watchmakers were fourth or fifth or sixth generation watchmakers. Then I still went to school at night, and incidentally, I was a pretty good runner, and when I graduated, I got running scholarships, which I couldn't accept. They were good scholarships, but I couldn't accept because there was no way in which I could support myself or send money home, as we all did. We all supported our younger people and younger brothers and siblings. And so I went to school at night in New York, and I liked school very much. I worked during the day. And however, when we're getting now into the late 1920s, incidentally, in running, I'd run marathons. I always liked long distance running. I was not a fast runner, but I could endure. And well, in the 1928, 29, I was head watchmaker of this company, where originally I was just a young apprentice or a junior watchmaker, where I really could repair and fit parts and make parts, and I designed tools for my boss, which he patented, and I thought nothing of it because he was paying me. It was done on his time. And I also wrote the catalogs, and I drew the drawings of the cabinets and the systems, even invented a couple of systems, and a couple of tools which are still being sold. Some of these are filing fixtures, some of them are hairspring work, and so on. Then in the 30s, I went to night school, still night college, and the Depression hit, severe depression. By that time I was married, but still going to school at night. And because of the Depression, the whole revolution in education took place in America under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. There were boys who were leaving high school at 13, 14, or 15, just so they can get any job and augment the salaries, the meager salaries that were coming in. But what they were doing, they were displacing married men's position. So the Congress and the Senate and the President, they convened and they created what's called the Smith-Hughes Act, where nobody could leave school until he was 16 and a half. And if he left school, he'd have to go one full day a year, one full day a week, called a continuation school in those days, to have an academic subject as well. It could be typing or other subjects. But to keep the other children in school, they created the law. But to keep them in school so they wouldn't be truant or play sick or something, they created the vocational school system, where trades of all kinds throughout the nation were taught in schools. So they would stay there. Those who, let's say, didn't have the academic ability to become lawyers or doctors or draftsmen would become tradesmen. And the trades were every conceivable kind of trade. Certain parts of the country had specialization trade. New York City, with its very wide numbers of industries, actually started going to have a school there. They would teach, as far as I'm concerned, they were going to teach watchmaking. There was jewelry, optical mechanics, dressmaking, shoemaking, barbering, let's say, dental mechanics. And of course there was the regular electrical trade, the cabinet making, woodworking, house building, and so on, plumbing, everything. Everything was taught. And so they advertised for well-known, good, competent men with adequate education to pass academic subjects to be the teachers in these vocational schools. And of course, being a depression, everybody who was unemployed wants to become a teacher. It's guaranteed salary with summers, 10 weeks or so, or less, open where you can do extra work and earn extra money. And you had a pension, which was unheard of in ordinary industry. And so they held this open examination for watchmakers. As far as I'm concerned, the watchmakers. And there were quite about 250 applicants for that one position. And by that time, I was pretty well, I had a pretty good reputation in the industry downtown. I was making parts of movements, not complete movements, but the bridges, stems, wheels, pinions, everything. Balance staffs was nothing to make, and so on. Stems, $1 a piece, with or without sample. Pallet bridge, $5. A barrel bridge was the most expensive. Of course, it required the greatest accuracy and the most amount of work. So they gave the examination, which required an academic background, college, 2 years of college at least, and required a 7-year apprenticeship and a 7 or 9 year journeyman. And you had to prove it by books, by salary, by deposit slips, everything away, affidavits from employers and so on. Then, of course, was an practical examination and a theoretical examination. Well, by that time, you know, I told you about the books. I devoured these books. I devoured every book I could lay my hands on watchmaking. And so the theoretical part was a pushover for me. And I got 98% on an exam. And the nearest one to me had 54. I won't tell you his name, but he was head teacher for Boulevard, traveling around the country talking about Acatron repairs. And he took second for the 54, and then there was one other. There were 3 given the license to teach. There was one other who had a 48 or something.
Are you suggesting here that you were probably one of the first watchmaking instructors in a trade school?
I was in New York City. I was the first teacher in a tax-supported watchmaking school. And when I did, there was no textbooks on it. There were no machine shop. There was no regular budget for tools. So I went to first, I had to take extra courses at night to have teacher training. It's well enough that I had an academic background. It's well enough that I could pass an examination and make a watch if I had to. but that I had the knowledge how to teach. And we took all kinds of courses, trade analysis, lesson planning, creating job sheets, simple. For example, they asked me to give a sample lesson in front of this professor of education. He says, by the way, Mr. Freed, what you've done would carry 4 years of education if you could condense it. You take that little lesson, which I thought was nothing. I want next week you're assigned a 40-minute lesson. Take that subject, and things like that. So that was even while I was teaching, I went to night school to continue my teaching education, and I did that for about 6 or 7 years more, and then of course there were no textbooks. In the meantime, I had joined the Horological Society of New York, and there, that was really whatever deficiency I had in theoretical or practical watchmaking was made up by those people. They were all the people I told you about, who probably worked uptown now and worked everywhere, or new immigrants. So the names there: Ferdinand T. Hoschka, George Bergleitner, Peloton, whose name appears in books, and so on. And we learned so much from them. I was able to visit them. And Charlie Johns, who was well known as he won 2 national watchmaking prizes in watchmaking, and he was the finest graduate from all schools, from the Bowman Technical Institute, the finest graduate ever. And he made a clock, all hand, ran for a year, that was exhibited in the 1939 World's Fair. So you really were in an atmosphere of excellence.
Well, Henry, we've learned a lot about your past, a fascinating background. I think we understand a little better what has brought you into your prominence today. I'm wondering if we can kind of wind up this interview with you telling us a little bit about how you look forward to the future. What is the future in the watch business or in horology? What about the future career in horology? And do you have any real parting advice for young watchmakers today? Would you please address this question for us?
Yes, having lived a little bit longer than some people, I can say that there are always let's say, foreseers of doom around. And I remember reading a book by Charles Edgar Fritz, and he was advising everybody to get out of the watch business, and it's going to be terrible. It's going to be terrible. And he was quite a person. He was a genius, in fact, in electronics. But he made his living as a writer of watch articles for the Jeweler's Circle at Keystone. When? In the 1890s. But look how the watch business not only survived, but has prospered. Time is a very important element, and everybody is, as we get on, where trains are arriving and leaving on time, things are doing so exact, precise, you're timing everything. The watch and its timepiece are going to be important forever and a day, regardless what system they use to measure time. And most everyone will want his own individual source of time, and be a watch. For example, when the electric watch came, he says, well, this is the end of the business. The watchmaker was going to sell his tools. England did that, and they destroyed their own supremacy in horology when they thought machine-made tools now going to make watches. The traditional way of making watches, not for me. And I got some of the old tools. They're terrific. I used them to clear up the present time. And then also, so we had the electric watch come on. And people said, well, that's the end of my trade. What I spent so long in apprenticeship, so long learning, going to trade meetings, and now what am I going to have, electric watches? And so they got scared. And we, the American Watchmakers Institute, had to go around the country on missionary to keep them in the trade and tell them why they're going to make more money. And the truth is, those that stuck did. And then came the Accutron, the tuning fork watch. Oh, now it's only this. But they learned to repair the Accutron watch and make more money repairing the Accutron than they did ordinary watches. And then came the quartz watch, a watch without any moving parts. So now The calamity, the doomsday has arrived. How are we going to compete with a watch that has no wheels, pinions, gears, or anything? And so, for a while, these watches appeared. And I remember when, and then of course I was representing Texas Instrument in a landmark court case where they were saying, well, these digital watches have no moving parts. You can't tax us for a watch. It's no wheels, no pinions. It hasn't got a dial, it's got a display. And they won. So the watches came in for $1. They were given as souvenirs and so on. But did that destroy it? No. Now they had quartz watches, yes. But the timekeeping is quartz. But the wheels, gears, and pinions and all were still there. Now we have chronographs where you can have a stepping motor. But the watchmaker now has really realized to stay with it. They've learned to repair the electric watch. But more than that comes a renaissance of regular watches. You find watches you read in the Sunday papers or near Christmas or Father's Day, whatever. Watches, they find watches, 20,000, 50,000, 150,000, 250,000. If you get $700 watch, it's still a good watch, but it has no status value. Today, there are people who are making watches by hand, like only a month and a half ago, I was at Patek Philippe, where they're making watches. They only make 12,000 a year, yet they can afford to advertise in the most expensive media throughout the world. The profit motive is great. But, like I was once interviewed on telephone by a national magazine, I think it was Gentleman's Quarterly. They said, why should I buy a watch like that when I can get a small quartz watch without a minute hands or without it for much, much less? I say, sir, you happily married? Well, it's a personal question, yes, but I am very much so, I don't mind telling you. I know who was asking, so I know what to ask. I said, now, if you want, why don't you hang a nice picture on your wall with a good photograph of your wife? And he said, well, I will. I'll hire a good artist to do it. Well, is it a better image? No, but there's something there that has a soul that a photograph can't catch. I said, same thing with a watch. You can have a watch, but if you can have a watch, yes, it'll keep good time. It'll keep very good time. But if you want really a work of art, a good piece of mechanism that you're proud of, and still keep pretty good time, you're not going to navigate with it, you're not going to be an astronomer. You get these handmade watches, you have the brains of a genius on your wrist or in your pocket, and you'll see that watch, you see the artist, the artisanship, that each part, whether it's seen or not, is a work of art. Yeah, that's the soul of horology. And it's continuing. Now there's a whole renaissance of these watches being made handmade, either handmade or machine started, but hand finished. Of course, the machines, as good as they are, haven't got the touch that a good, trained, gifted artisan can supply to it. Sure, there's a finish. There's their part for it. Then also, who's going to service these watches? Well, it takes a person who's well trained, who's make good money repairing the watches. They're going to have people who have to repair them. But also, the art of these timepieces attract people of intelligence and of culture and training. Some of them are retiring, and they're taking up the art of restoring these timepieces. And that's going on. It's going to continue. It's going to continue. Now, the future, the very future, there'll always be a quartz watch for a fellow who wants to go swimming with it, or playing tennis with it, or whatever. But there'll always be a person, an aesthete who wants the finest possible piece of workmanship, giving you a similar or the same service. And that's true. And
other than these watches, you mentioned a renaissance of these finely manufactured watches. How do you believe our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren will be telling time? Do you have some insight into what is going to happen?
I'm sorry to anticipate you, but I just can't wait to answer you. Sure, because the wrist timepiece, whether it's the wrist instrument, shall we give it a broader use, will be an instrument that gets its timekeeping. If it's going to be direct, it's going to get it from a signal and a satellite. There's going to be a source of energy, which maybe through cryogenics or whatever, is going to make the energy cell very efficient and very strong to receive and absorb the energy from outer space to transpose it into a timepiece that will keep time to within a millionth of a second, a year, or maybe better. And of course, the same instrument, plenty of room on the wrist, will be so miniaturized and so perfected that it will also give you much other information. It'll give you all kinds of information, maybe retrievable information, something like the computers do today. Everything that's made big today is going to be made do the same thing small. You remember the computers of old, the size of a wall in a whole apartment. Today, you can laptop, and that's not the end either. It's all miniaturized.
Henry, on behalf of the American Watchmakers Institute, I certainly want to thank you for this very, very interesting information about your background, and I think now we understand a little more who Henry Freed is, and we appreciate this very much. Thank you.
Thank you.